So I came across this clip from the Shawn Ryan Show.
Illuminati
Didn't the Templar turn into the Masons?
is to preserve the knowledge of the antediluvian world.
How do they get the knowledge?
He said that the lower levels of the Masonic order, that they give them a different meaning to the symbols.
That's kind of what I thought it was.
Yeah, the occult is a very broad term. The mystery schools are a little more specific.
All these billionaires are building these underground bunkers, and they have
Yeah.
Now, I've got some thoughts. There's a lot to be said here. Some of it's quite compelling. Some of it is worth questioning. But what really caught my attention was how it was so casually brought up. Like, yeah, the elites are building these giant bunkers because it may or may not be the end of the world or some catastrophic event. And also, they have this ancient knowledge. So let's break it down. Mystery schools, bunkers, billionaires, hidden knowledge, and the mythology that may back it up.
You had mentioned earlier, you think, all these billionaires are building these underground bunkers, and they have this
Yes,
access. I know it's a fact.
Yep.
But that they have access to all this ancient knowledge through what, the occult?
Through the mystery schools.
I mean, at what point do you just get introduced like, oh, hey, you made it. Here's the
You mean
here's
into the mystery
knowledge.
schools?
You might want to build a bunker.
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. But
What is the occult? I'm new to all of this.
Okay, so, well, the occult is a very general term. The occult can encompass, your everyday Satanist.
That's kind of what I thought it was.
Yeah, the occult is a very broad term. The mystery schools are a little more specific. The mystery schools go back to the ancient.
All right, so that's how it starts off. The occult is a very broad term. There are billionaires building bunkers. Well, let's start off there. Billionaires are building bunkers, yes. And we only know from what they say why they're doing so. We've heard from Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. We know Jeff Bezos. Who knows? Many people are probably building bunkers for what they deem to be maybe a catastrophic event incoming. However, it is the occult part where it's throwing up the biggest red flags. He said it's a very general term and then brings up Satanists, your modern day Satanists. And I think there's a big issue with that. And my big issue with that is, let's easily define the occult. The occult means hidden or secret from the Latin term occultus. The modern day Satanists aren't occultists. Why is that? The groups that are in the occult are generally known as, let's say, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Neoplatonists, the Theurgists, the Hermeticists, the Gnostics, ceremonial magicians, the Pythagoreans, and many, many more. I think it's very important that we don't conflate the two terms, occultists and Satanists. The modern day satanic panic hot topic Satanists from the Anton LaVey version are not occultists. Occultists are ones who practice and try to bring divine light into their body and mind and soul, awaken their spirit on a path, and try to understand the hidden forces of nature, thus also understanding the hidden forces of their own being. So I think this conflation of these two terms is quite inappropriate.
Times. And the function of the mystery school fundamentally is to preserve the knowledge of the antediluvian world. And more specifically, to preserve the knowledge that was transmitted to mankind by the gods who descended in the Golden Age. That is the purpose of the mystery schools. And there's various mystery schools around the world, but...
like what are they?
Well, you have the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Yeah, I will definitely agree. The mystery schools are meant to take secret, hidden, and divine knowledge and protect it through time. So individuals, when they go through these mystery schools, have the ability to unlock this knowledge through study, practice, and ritual. And he was just going to bring up the Eleusinian Mysteries being one of those things. We'll talk about that in just a bit.
That were the ancient Greek mysteries. You had the Egyptian mysteries. You have the modern adaptations, like you had the Knights Templar, who were to some extent a mystery school, but then you had the Masons, the Freemasonry.
Didn't the Templar turn into the Masons?
The Masons preserve some of the traditions of the Templar order. Yes, there's modifications, but fundamentally there's let's say the pillars of Masonry do come to some extent from the Knights Templar.
Yes, he is correct. As Manly P. Hall has stated, the Templars have helped maintain and collect knowledge that then the Freemasons have taken into their initiatory structures and taught to their initiates. The mystery schools, like the Eleusinian mystery schools or the Egyptian mystery schools, the Greek mystery schools of Eleusis are very important because it is the story of Persephone as she was stolen by Hades and brought into the underworld. And Demeter, her mother, was looking for her. Persephone was in the fields of Eleusis picking flowers with her handmaidens as Hades, also known as Pluto, came up through a portal and stole her and dragged her into the underworld. Demeter, being her mother, was fraught with frenzy and went chasing after her. She didn't know where she went. Thus, being upset, she made it so nothing grew in that time frame. Demeter being the goddess of fertility. And so in that time frame, in our normal everyday world, that's when our world goes into winter and nothing grows. And then Persephone, coming up and ascending from the underworld, brought spring back to the lands. When Persephone was in the underworld, she ate of the pomegranate. This was something that she wasn't supposed to do. In many myths, if you eat the fruit of that realm, something will happen to her. And what happened to her is that she wasn't just able to be set free, but she must every 6 months go and descend into the underworld. And then 6 months later, she can ascend back up into our world, thus giving us spring, summer, fall, and winter. These are the growing seasons. And this is a way for humanity in that time frame to understand what was going on with nature. The Egyptian mysteries are another mystery school where they learned the rites of Isis and Osiris. As Osiris fought with his brother Set, Set also known as Shaitan or the Dark One, Set dismembered Osiris, and Osiris was strewn about into many parts, 13 parts out into the world as Isis went to gather those parts. The story of the Egyptian mysteries is the story of Osiris, the dying god being reborn. And so these mystery schools give us humans the ability to understand our place in the world and meaning into our life.
And so you have different variations of mystery schools. This is the Illuminati, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be a one faction of the mystery schools, or maybe a term that encompasses them all. And again, the primary purpose of
the Illuminati is not a mystery school, so somebody must inform him. The Illuminati is just another secret society created by Adam Weishaupt. It was more of a scientific illuminism of atheists trying to take control of a narrative. And so a lot of the members of the Bavarian Illuminati, they infiltrated many different magical and secret societies in that time frame, trying to change the way things were done, thus trying to take control of society at that time. That's one theory and hypothesis. But the Illuminati are not a mystery school. And this is something that is kind of a red flag. So he must do a little more reading before he conflates mystery schools with the Illuminati. Mystery schools are, like I said, the Egyptians and the Greeks, the Pythagoreans. There are many mystery schools. Plato was a part of the Greek mystery schools, and so you can find the teachings and the rites of the mystery schools in his writing. However, if you don't have the practice, study, and knowledge of symbols of that culture and of those teachings, you won't truly understand them. That's why what he's saying doesn't really make sense when you're talking about the ancient teachings of the ages and these billionaires and the secret knowledge that they're holding, and then somehow intertwining this with the bunkers. Different secret societies that he could have named that are integrated within the mystery schools are the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Theosophy, Anthroposophical Society, which created the Waldorf schools. He could have named the Renaissance thinkers, the Hermeticists of that time, like Marsilio Ficino. He could have named Henry Cornelius Agrippa in his 3 books of philosophy and in that time frame. He also could have named the Neoplatonists, like thinkers such as Iamblichus. He was a theurgist trying to bring divine knowledge and embody it into his being through ritual. And then there's that of Plato and everyone in that time frame and part of the academy, the Pythagorean mystery schools, the mystery cult, and so on and so on. Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are all things that he could have named, but instead he named the Illuminati. So I say, sir, you need to do a little more research.
The mystery schools is to preserve the knowledge that was transmitted by the gods to mankind in the antediluvian world before the cataclysm. The knowledge that was transmitted to mankind during the Golden Age, during Zep Tepi the first time. And that is functional knowledge, by the way. It's not just, it's not just sort of arcane, mysterious knowledge that pertains to, just bizarre stuff. No, we're talking about functional knowledge, information that is very important, that is transmitted.
Yes, it is actually quite functionally is correct. These mystery schools held this knowledge through time during cataclysm and brought it into the world for everyone to see. Yes, this is very functional knowledge that the mystery schools kept, that came to them from the gods in the pre-Diluvian period. Now that may or may not be true, and we can look into Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and many others great thinkers and researchers to see if that hypothesis is true. However, what we can say is that the mythology that the mystery schools is passing along isn't something that comes or is concocted by sages or shamans, but that's something that stems from the unconscious mind of every individual. These things are well houses of human knowledge and experience that comes out in our everyday life. Things like virtue, how to live the good life, what it means to be a fully realized human, how to actualize our psyche so it is the most refined and virtuous, as well as we have principles and character to back ourselves up to, how to understand human nature and our place in the world. This is very functional knowledge that today in the postmodern world is quite needed for us to all truly understand what is happening in this time of cataclysm, which then comes back to the ideas of billionaires and bunkers.
Transmitted through myths also. Myths transmit knowledge. The wise concocted those myths. The ancient sages they devised the myths. And we're talking about the famous myths from the ancients among the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Mesopotamians. What we today look at as bedtime stories. What we today view as folklore.
Now, him saying this isn't correct. The sages didn't concoct. These things weren't invented by high priests. Myth arises from the collective unconscious, not deliberately invented. Joseph Campbell, a mythologist that I think many should read, was heavily influenced by Carl Jung and believed that myths emerge naturally from the archetypal structures of the psyche, recurring patterns and symbols shared by all human beings. In that sense, myths weren't created, they were discovered, like dreams that arise from deep within the collective human soul. To quote Joseph Campbell, myth is the secret opening from which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human cultural manifestation. And again, sages, shamans, and poets, they received the myths more than they made them. These figures might articulate or shape mythic stories, but Campbell would say they are more like instruments or translators of a deeper current rather than conscious architects of fiction. They're tuning into something bigger than themselves, cosmic patterns, psychic truths, existential archetypes, and then they give them form. The mythic image is not something made up. It is something that comes up from the deeper reaches of the human psyche. So no, mythology isn't a top-down concoction by a priesthood. It's a bottom-up flowering from the human depths of our experience, shaped through ritual, symbol, and story, until finally it becomes the narrative architecture of a people.
Of course, historians and archaeologists and anthropologists don't really give much weight to these myths. Oh, that's just Greek mythology. But the myths were intentionally designed to transmit information, to preserve information and transmit it through time. And it's done primarily through symbolism, because languages change, right?
Yes, it is translated through time. Myths are meant to hold this knowledge. So when people read these myths, experience these myths, and go through initiatory ritual cycles and ceremonies with these myths, truly can embody these myths. However, it is not something that was constructed to do so by people, but constructed to do so by the human unconscious itself. That is why it is so beautiful. And that is why it is so hard for anthropologists and Egyptologists to get behind these things at times, because it is something continental, not analytical.
Mm-hmm.
Languages change, but the meaning of the symbols always remains the same.
So how do you think these guys get into, how do they get the knowledge? Have you thought about that?
You mean the people who are in the...
Yeah, the bunker builders.
So it's, again...
they could just be worried about nuclear war.
There's a couple of things that's true, yes, absolutely. That's certainly in play. But there's a couple of ways. I mean, one, if you're a member of the mystery schools, and I'm not saying your neighborhood Freemason, you know, just your average Joe who happens to be a member of a lodge. No, you got to be way high up into these organizations before they start to transmit this information to you. Because at the lower levels of Masonry, They're not told. This comes from, by the way, Manly P. Hall, who is one of the greatest Masonic philosophers, probably the greatest Masonic philosopher. He said that the lower levels of the Masonic order, that they give them a different meaning to the symbols, and they don't tell them the true meaning behind the rituals and the symbols, and you don't get the true meaning until you get to the higher levels. And I think that's probably true across the board in the mystery schools. But so you can learn this in the mystery schools, or I think at this point probably let's just assume for a moment, and I don't know if it's true. Okay, it's just a hypothesis. Let's assume that there is a body out there in the solar system that's coming back in, that's on this path around the sun, that gets slingshotted back out into outer space, comes back around every 6,480 years. Maybe we've detected it. Maybe NASA's detected it. Maybe some of our military satellites up there have detected this body that's coming into our solar system. And that, I think, would prompt, the building of underground bunkers.
He didn't seem to understand the question. And if he did, he didn't answer correctly, I think. And so how do they get the knowledge of the ancient secrets, these billionaires, is kind of the question. And I would state they don't, unless they do the work. You can become a member of a secret society, a magical society, or a mystery school. However, in this day and age, mystery schools don't exist. They have been covered up and lost to us, which is why you must search and find them. And if these people do have it, it's not the billionaires we know, it's the names that we don't know. So everyday individuals can become Freemasons, or you could become part of a chapter of the Golden Dawn, or you could become your own solitary initiate. What it takes is hard work, discipline, and practice. Read the books, it's everywhere. That's when it goes along the other term of the occult, if it's hidden. But in this day and age, we all have the ability to read these books. He stated Manly P. Hall being one of the greatest Masonic philosophers of all time, and I would state he's one of the greatest esoteric philosophers of all time as well, because he has collected the data and knowledge and writings of secret societies and mystery schools throughout the ages and put them into his encyclopedia, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He's put the rituals into all of his books so anybody can read them. And then that is the differentiation between people who have billions of dollars and are looking after power, money, and the control of people. Because of the true mystery school doesn't look for people who want to do such things like that. What it does is it wants people who have principles, character, and live by virtue, who practice and study diligently, who do such things as rituals, meditation, breath work, and study their books like they would be studying a philosophy text. And then bringing up the idea of a Planet X or a Nibiru really delves this whole topic into conspiratorial jargon. And it doesn't mean that I don't believe that such things could exist, but we can make this more grounded. And that is my issue with this part of this interview. It was a brilliant interview, but he tries not to delve it into the new age spiritual nonsense. But if we're already talking about billionaires with bunkers, then why do these billionaires also have to have ancient and secret knowledge? And I think people at the top of the pyramid do collect and hoard said knowledge. But the point of it is that you have to pass through many doors with the right and correct keys. And so that's why it takes diligence, study, and practice, and understanding what it takes to have a true heart and live accordance to virtues. So it's not just any billionaire that can do this. Also important to note that millionaires don't believe in astrology, billionaires do. So that is something to think about. And that if you want to know more about this kind of thing, Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock do delve super deep into all of these topics about what happened pre-Younger Dryas, what is going on with things like Zep Tepi, like he stated, and Göbekli Tepe, and what were the Great Pyramids and the Great Sphinx. These are all questions that really, truly needed to be asked.
We have deep underground military bases. I'm sure you're aware of that all over the world, but especially under the continental United States. We're talking 1 mile to 2 miles below the surface of the earth. And it was
1 mile to 2 miles
below the surface of the earth. Yes.
I just watched this documentary last night about how Russia dug basically a hole. They got, I think, 7.1 miles deep.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't go anymore. Nobody else has done it. They said that the earth, I can't remember if it was every mile or every kilometer, the earth, it gets 60 degrees hotter.
Yeah. Probably.
It'll be like 120 degrees.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened, and then the audience can draw their own conclusions. But during World War II, do you remember what one of the primary problems for Hitler was? One of the major reasons why the Nazis lost that war was because we were bombing the...
This is a good way to end this. Let me add a little bit of my own conspiracy theory into this, and there are others who believe so, and there are papers that back this up. But some think the Nazis never lost the war. Some think Germany did. And why I state that maybe the Nazis never lost the war is because if you go look up something called Operation Paperclip, we will then have the knowledge and understanding that the top Nazi scientists and leaders of that time never were prosecuted in the Nuremberg trials, but actually were separated to all the great powers at that time frame. So look it up and make your own decisions. So to finish this up, not every billionaire is in on it. The ones who are, you've probably never even heard of, but the knowledge they chase, it is real. It's older than empires, older than language, and it didn't vanish. It just went underground. Myths, symbols, and rituals weren't made to entertain. They were made to transmit something. And if a few hands are still trying to decipher them, maybe you should too. So if you're into uncovering the esoteric layers beneath modern chaos, like, subscribe, and follow the thread, because the mystery never ended. You just started noticing it.